The throne room stretched for what seemed like kilometers, all black chrome and holographic star maps that cast Thomas Garrett's face in shifting shades of blue and violet. He'd been standing in shackles for what his internal chronometer, the one Earth's diplomatic corps had implanted behind his left eye, told him was 47 minutes, felt like years. Above him, through the transparent composite ceiling, Earth hung like a blue marble someone had left balanced on the edge of a table. One push. That's all it would take. Queen Zephyra hadn't moved in those 47 minutes. She sat on her throne, elevated 3 meters above the floor, surrounded by holographic tactical displays showing Earth's military assets, which was a polite way of saying she was watching humanity's complete inability to defend itself play out in real time. Thomas had watched too, had seen the defense satellites wink out one by one, had watched the orbital stations go dark, had mentally catalogued every weapon humanity had spent 2 centuries building turn out to be completely, devastatingly useless. Ambassador Garrett, her voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk, smooth, sharp, impossible to ignore. You have been silent for some time. Have you nothing to say on behalf of your species? Thomas lifted his head and met her eyes. Mistake, probably. Her eyes were gold, not amber or yellow or any other color humans used to approximate gold, but actual molten gold, luminous in a way that suggested either genetic engineering or evolution on a world very different from Earth. The long ears that swept back from her skull like elegant daggers only emphasized the inhumanity of her, the sheer alienness that his briefing files had failed to capture. She was beautiful the way a storm was beautiful, something you admired right before it killed you. What would you like me to say? Thomas asked, keeping his voice level through sheer diplomatic training. That we surrender. That we acknowledge your superiority. That we beg for mercy we both know isn't coming. One of Zephyra's ears tilted forward. The briefing files had mentioned that meant interest, or possibly amusement, or possibly she was about to have him vaporized. Cross-species communication was imprecise like that. Honesty, she said. Unexpected from a diplomat. Your species has spent the last 6 months lying to my envoys, promising cooperation while building weapons you believed I would not detect. Did you truly think I would not notice? We noticed you conquering 17 star systems in the last decade, Thomas shot back, then immediately regretted it because antagonizing the woman who could turn Earth into a cinder was probably poor strategy. We noticed you've never met a species you didn't absorb into your empire. What exactly were we supposed to do? Roll over? Yes. Zephyra leaned forward, and the movement was all predatory grace. That is precisely what you should have done. It would have saved considerable time and resources. Not really our style, Thomas said. Humanity has this annoying habit of surviving things we shouldn't. We're stubborn like that. Something shifted in Zephyra's expression. Not quite a smile, but close enough to make Thomas's pulse spike. I am aware. I have read your history. Your species is remarkably talented at turning disadvantages into prolonged suffering. It is almost admirable. Almost, Thomas repeated. I'll take it, so what now? You've got your fleet in position. Earth's defenses are scrap metal. You've made your point. Are we doing the whole surrender or die speech? Or can we skip to the part where you tell me what you actually want? The throne room fell silent. Even Zephyra's advisors, 6 Vexari warriors standing at attention near the walls, seemed to stop breathing. Thomas realized he might have crossed a line from diplomatic honesty into suicidal idiocy. Then Zephyra stood. The movement was fluid, controlled, and absolutely terrifying because she was tall, nearly 7 feet in her ceremonial armor, and when she descended the steps from her throne, each footfall echoed like a countdown. She stopped 3 feet from Thomas, close enough that he could see the faint bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin, the mark of Vexari nobility. What I want, she said softly, and her voice carried despite the quiet, is for you to understand your position. Your planet is surrounded. Your defenses are destroyed. Your governments are in chaos, arguing over whether to surrender or launch a final desperate attack that will accomplish nothing but mutual annihilation. You, Ambassador Garrett, are the last reasonable voice Earth has sent me, so I will make you an offer I have extended to no other species. Thomas waited, his heart hammering against his ribs. I will spare your planet, Zephyra said. I will withdraw my fleet. I will guarantee Earth's independence and protection under Vexari oversight. Your species will remain autonomous, your cultures intact, your people free to govern themselves as they see fit. Relief flooded through Thomas so fast he felt dizzy. That's more than we hoped for. What's the catch? One condition. Zephyra's golden eyes locked on his. You will remain with me. The words hung in the air like a grenade with a pulled pin. Thomas's brain scrambled to process the implications. Failed, rebooted, tried again. I'm sorry, what? You heard correctly, Ambassador. I will spare your planet on one condition, that you become mine. Yours, Thomas repeated, because apparently his vocabulary had reduced to echoing single words. As in a hostage. As in my chosen companion. A position of great honor in Vexari culture. Zephyra tilted her head, studying him with unsettling intensity. You will remain at my side, share my quarters, participate in court functions, and accompany me as I govern my empire. You will be mine in all ways that matter. Thomas's diplomatic training had covered hostage situations, cultural exchanges, political marriages, and about 40 other scenarios. This wasn't any of them. This was something else entirely, something the gold in her eyes and the careful precision of her words suggested was deeply significant in ways he couldn't begin to understand. And if I refuse? Zephyra raised one hand. The holographic displays shifted, showing targeting solutions for every major city on Earth. New York, Beijing, Mumbai, Lagos, Sao Paulo, London. Then I will demonstrate why my empire has never failed to bring a species to compliance. You have 1 hour to decide, Ambassador. Your freedom and comfort or 8 billion lives. Choose wisely. She turned and walked back to her throne, leaving Thomas standing in shackles, staring at the tactical displays showing his home about to burn, knowing he'd never really had a choice at all. The holding cell was nice, as cells went. Spacious. Climate-controlled. There was even a viewing screen showing Earth in real time, which Thomas suspected was either mercy or the most refined form of psychological torture ever devised. He'd been staring at it for 53 minutes, watching clouds drift over continents he'd probably never see again, doing math that kept coming out the same way no matter how he rearranged the variables. His freedom versus 8 billion lives. Not really a fair trade. Not really a choice. The door opened without sound, and Zephyra entered. She'd removed her ceremonial armor, replaced it with something simpler that somehow made her more intimidating rather than less. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin were more visible now, tracing lines down her arms that pulsed with faint light. Have you decided? She asked. Do I get to know what I'm agreeing to? Thomas stood, meeting her eyes despite every instinct screaming to look away. You said companion. That's vague enough to mean anything from dinner conversationalist to something I'm pretty sure violates several interspecies protocols. It means, Zephyra said, moving closer, that you will be mine. In Vexari culture, a queen's chosen is partner advisor, and she paused, seeming to search for the right word. Intimacy is not required, but neither is it forbidden. The bond is what you make of it. That's still incredibly vague. Yes, her ears tilted in what he was learning might be amusement. Your species relies heavily on contracts and explicit terms. Mine values experience over explanation. You will understand by living it. Thomas laughed, a short bark of sound with no humor in it. So I'm supposed to just trust that this chosen companion thing won't turn out to be some elaborate form of slavery. You are supposed to trust that I keep my word, Zephyra said, and something in her voice made him pause. I have offered to spare your planet. That is not a lie or manipulation. I will do exactly as I promised. But I do not make such offers without cost. Why me? The question burst out before Thomas could stop it. You've got an empire. You could have anyone. Why demand a human you barely know as the price for Earth's survival? Zephara's expression shifted into something he couldn't read. You stood before me in chains and showed defiance rather than fear. You spoke truth when lies would have been easier. You met my eyes when my own warriors struggled to hold my gaze. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. I have conquered 17 systems, Ambassador Garrett. I have seen thousands of species kneel. None of them looked at me the way you did, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a god to be feared. That interests me. You interest me, and I have learned to value rare things. Thomas's mouth went dry. This was insane, all of it. But the viewing screen behind Zephara showed Earth, beautiful and fragile and completely at her mercy, and he realized the decision had never really been in doubt. Fine, he said. I accept. I'll be your chosen companion or whatever this is, but Earth goes free, completely free. No secret occupation, no puppet governments, no oversight. That's really just control with better marketing. Agreed. Zephara extended her hand, palm up. We seal bargains with touch among my people. Your hand, Ambassador. Thomas placed his hand in hers, and her fingers closed around his with surprising gentleness. Her skin was warm, almost hot, and he felt something pass between them, not quite electricity but close, like a circuit completing. It is done, Zephara said. Earth is spared, and you are mine. The transport to her personal quarters happened in a blur of corridors and lift tube that moved so fast Thomas's stomach protested. They emerged into a space that made his holding cell look like a closet, rooms that flowed into each other with no clear walls, furniture that seemed to grow from the floor, and windows that showed space in such crystal clarity it felt like standing in the void itself. These are your quarters now as well, Zephara said, gesturing to the sprawling space. You will have privacy when you require it, but you will sleep here, in my domain. Your belongings from Earth are being retrieved, and will arrive within the cycle. Thomas walked to the window, staring out at the star field. My belongings, right. That'll be one suitcase and a plant I'm pretty sure died while I was being captured. You make jokes when uncomfortable, Zephara observed. I have noticed this in your species' entertainment transmissions. Humor is how we cope with existential dread, Thomas said. That and alcohol, but I'm guessing you don't keep Earth whiskey on hand. I will acquire some. She moved to stand beside him at the window, and Thomas became acutely aware of the size difference between them, the power that radiated from her like heat from a star. You gave up everything for your people, Ambassador. That deserves acknowledgement. Thomas, he said quietly, if I'm going to be yours, you should probably use my name. Her ears tilted forward. Thomas, she repeated, testing the syllables. Very well, and you will call me Zephara, not your Majesty or Queen or any other title. Between us, there will be honesty. Honesty, Thomas said. Okay, honest question. What happens now? Zephara turned to face him fully. Now you learn what it means to stand beside a Vexari queen. I govern an empire that spans 17 star systems, Thomas. I negotiate treaties, command fleets, judge disputes, and maintain order across species that would tear each other apart without central authority. It is not simple work. It is not kind work. But it is necessary work. And you want me to, what watch advise? I want your perspective, Zephara said. Your human viewpoint on problems I have seen only through Vexari eyes. I want your thoughts on governance, on justice, on the smaller species that comprise much of my empire. I want, she paused, and something vulnerable flickered across her face. I want someone who will tell me truth instead of what they believe I wish to hear. Thomas studied her, really looked at her for the first time without the filter of fear or diplomatic necessity. Saw the weight she carried in the set of her shoulders, the exhaustion hidden behind those golden eyes, the scars, faint but present, marking her arms. "Those scars," he said. "How'd you get them?" Zephara's expression closed like a door slamming. "That is a story for another time. Come, you will observe today's court session. Consider it your introduction to your new role." She swept toward the door and Thomas followed, wondering what the hell he'd actually agreed to and why part of him, a very stupid, very human part, was almost curious to find out. 3 weeks in space, and Thomas had learned several important things. First, that Vexari court politics made Earth's most Byzantine bureaucracies look like children's games. Second, that Zephara never slept more than 4 hours a cycle and expected him to keep pace. And third, that somewhere between the treaty negotiations and the tactical briefings, he'd stopped thinking of her as the enemy and started thinking of her as someone he couldn't quite define. He stood beside her throne now, his usual position during public sessions, watching her mediate a resource dispute between two vassal species who seemed intent on starting a war over mining rights. Zephara listened to both sides with infinite patience, asked pointed questions that revealed the actual issues beneath the rhetoric, and delivered a solution so elegant that both parties left satisfied. Probably. They left alive, at least, which Thomas had learned counted as diplomatic success. "You're good at this," Thomas said once the petitioners had departed. "The whole wise ruler thing." "Practice," Zephara said, reviewing reports on her holographic display. "I have been queen for 8 solar cycles. Before that, I fought for the throne for 3 cycles more. One learns or one dies." "Fought how?" Her ears flattened against her skull, the first time he'd seen that particular response. "Vexari's succession is not gentle, Thomas. We do not inherit power. We take it through combat trials that winnow candidates until only the strongest remains. I have the scars to prove my worthiness." Thomas thought of the marks on her arms, her shoulders, places she usually kept covered. How many others were there? In your trial? 47 candidates began. "I was the only one who survived to take the throne." She said it flatly, without emotion, but Thomas heard the weight beneath the words. 47, he repeated. "That's not a succession, that's a bloodbath." "It is necessity. Vexari rulers cannot be weak. The empire would fragment within a cycle." She looked at him, and something raw flickered in her eyes. "You judge our ways." "I'm trying to understand them," Thomas said carefully. "There's a difference. On Earth we'd call that system brutal, barbaric. But I've watched you govern these last few weeks, and everything you do is about maintaining order, preventing chaos, protecting the species under your rule. You're not a tyrant. You're—" "What?" Zephara stood, moving closer. "What am I, Thomas?" "Exhausted," he said honestly. "Isolated, powerful enough that everyone fears you and no one tells you the truth. You conquered Earth because you saw chaos coming, and decided it was better to control us than watch us destroy ourselves in some stupid war. I hate that you were probably right." Zephara stared at him for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she laughed. A real laugh, not the polite sound she made in court. Her advisors, stationed near the walls, looked genuinely shocked. "You are either remarkably perceptive or dangerously foolish," she said. "Can it be both?" "With you, Thomas, I suspect it usually is." She touched his shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar over the weeks, though it still sent electricity through his nerves. "Come, we are done with public sessions for the cycle. I wish to show you something." She led him through corridors he hadn't explored, deeper into the flagship's heart, until they reached a chamber that took his breath away. It was a garden, an actual garden in space, with plants from what must have been dozens of worlds, all growing in careful harmony under artificial sunlight. The air smelled like earth and growing things, and Thomas felt homesickness hit him like a physical blow. "This is where I come when the weight becomes too much," Zephara said quietly. "No advisors, no petitioners, no empire demanding my attention, just silence and green things that do not expect me to have answers." Thomas walked among the plants, recognizing Earth species mixed with alien ones. "You have our flowers here, roses, chrysanthemums. Hell, I collected samples from every world in my empire, a reminder that I rule not just territories but living things that deserve protection. She touched a rose petal with surprising gentleness. Your people see me as a conqueror. Perhaps they are right, but I prefer to think of myself as a gardener, forcing order on chaos, protecting what would otherwise be trampled. Thomas struggled for words. That's actually beautiful, terrifying but beautiful. They stood in the garden, surrounded by life from across the galaxy, and Thomas realized he was seeing the real Zephyra. Not the queen, not the warrior, but the person beneath. Someone who carried impossible weight and bore it alone because her culture demanded strength above all else. The alarm shattered the moment, harsh, urgent, the kind of sound that meant something had gone very wrong. Zephyra's entire demeanor shifted in an instant, warrior reflexes taking over as she accessed her command interface. "Rebellion," she said curtly. "A faction of my generals believes I have grown weak. They are attempting a coup." "Weak?" Thomas's voice cracked on the word. "You're the least weak person I've ever met. They believe my arrangement with you demonstrates softness. That sparing Earth rather than conquering it shows I have lost the Vexari way." Her face was stone, but Thomas saw fury burning in her golden eyes. "They are making their move now, while we are isolated from the main command center. Move behind me, Thomas. They will come through that door in approximately 30 seconds. "Like hell," Thomas said, moving beside her instead. "You don't get to protect me and fight a rebellion. That's terrible multitasking." "Thomas." The door exploded inward, and 3 Vexari warriors in combat armor burst through. Thomas saw Zephyra move, impossibly fast, inhumanly graceful, saw her engage the first attacker with a blade that appeared in her hand from nowhere. But the second warrior was raising a plasma weapon, aiming not at Zephyra but at Thomas, probably figuring the easiest way to hurt the queen was through her weakness. Thomas didn't think, didn't calculate odds or consider consequences. He just moved, throwing himself between Zephyra and the plasma bolt, and felt fire tear through his shoulder as the edge of the blast caught him. He hit the ground hard, smelling his own burned flesh, and distantly heard Zephyra's roar of rage as she tore through the attackers with violence that would have terrified him if he wasn't busy trying to remember how to breathe through pain. Then she was there, lifting him like he weighed nothing, her hands on his face. "You fool," she hissed, and he'd never heard that much emotion in her voice. "You absolute fool. Why would you?" "Couldn't let them hurt you," Thomas managed. Seemed important. Her hands were shaking. He'd never seen her hands shake. "I am a Vexari queen. I have survived 47 combat trials and 8 cycles of rule. I did not need your protection." "Yeah, well." Thomas tried to grin, felt it come out more as a grimace. "Maybe I wasn't protecting the queen. Maybe I was protecting someone I actually care about. Crazy concept." Zephyra went very still. Her golden eyes searched his face, and Thomas saw something break open in her expression. Something vulnerable and raw and completely at odds with the warrior queen who ruled 17 star systems. "You care," she repeated, like testing a foreign phrase. "Apparently," Thomas said. "Probably should have mentioned that before getting shot, but timing was never my strong suit." She carried him to her private medical bay, refusing to let her guards touch him, and Thomas watched those shaking hands treat his wound with a precision that spoke of extensive battlefield experience. When the worst of the pain had been managed by whatever miracle drug the Vexari had invented, he reached up and caught her hand. "Hey," he said softly, "I'm okay. See, still breathing and making questionable decisions." "You threw yourself in front of plasma fire," Zephyra said, and her voice carried wonder and fury in equal measure. "For me, why?" Thomas thought about lying, about maintaining some kind of professional distance, about all the reasons he should keep his actual feelings buried. Then he remembered she'd asked for honesty between them, and figured nearly dying earned him the right to deliver it. Because somewhere between your ultimatum and your garden and watching you govern an empire with honor instead of cruelty, you stopped being the enemy, he said. You became someone I couldn't stand to lose, which is probably the stupidest thing I've ever felt, but there it is. Zephara's hand tightened on his. Her other hand came up to cup his face, and Thomas saw her eyes shining with something that might have been tears if Vexari cried. Then she said something in her own language, words that rolled like thunder and sang like music, and even though Thomas didn't understand them, he felt their weight settle over him like a vow. "What did you say?" he whispered. "I claimed you," Zephara said, "before my ancestors and the stars themselves. You are mine, Thomas Garrett, in all the ways that matter, and her voice caught, I am yours in return. No one has ever chosen to stand beside me knowing the cost. No one has ever made me feel human, Thomas suggested. Alive, Zephara corrected. You make me feel alive, Thomas. And that terrifies me more than any battle ever has. Thomas pulled her down to him, ignoring the protest from his wounded shoulder, and kissed her. It was awkward. Their physiologies weren't quite compatible, and he was pretty sure he was doing it wrong. But Zephara made a sound low in her throat and kissed him back like she was learning a language she'd always wanted to speak. When they finally broke apart, Thomas was grinning despite the pain. "So, does this mean we're officially beyond the chosen companion stage?" "This means," Zephara said, her ears tilted in unmistakable affection, "that you are impossible, infuriating, and entirely too brave for someone with such a fragile body." "I'll take it," Thomas said. "Now about that rebellion." "Already handled," Zephara said. "My loyal guards will have arrested the conspirators by now. But the fact remains, Thomas, our bond has become visible enough to inspire rebellion. What we are to each other threatens the stability of my rule." "Then let's show them what we actually are," Thomas said. "Not weakness, not some human corrupting their queen, but partnership, something new. Something that might actually change both our civilizations." Zephara stared at him, and slowly that predatory smile spread across her face. "You wish to make a statement." "I wish to make history," Thomas corrected. "But yeah, statements work too." The joint broadcast to Earth and the Vexari Empire was scheduled for the next cycle, which gave Thomas exactly enough time to panic, get his wound properly treated, and write approximately 17 versions of a speech before giving up and deciding to just speak from the heart. Zephara watched his preparations with amusement, occasionally offering suggestions that ranged from helpful to clearly designed to make him more nervous. "You could mention that Vexari tradition requires consort candidates to demonstrate combat prowess," she said at one point. "Given that you threw yourself in front of plasma fire, I believe you qualify." "Consort," Thomas repeated, the words settling over him with significant weight. "That's a step up from companion." "Several steps," Zephara agreed. "It means you stand beside me not as decoration but as partner. Equal voice in governance, equal claim to authority, equal responsibility for the Empire's fate." Her expression grew serious. "It also means equal danger, Thomas. The rebellion we faced was merely the first. There will be others who see our bond as weakness to exploit." "Then we'll face them together," Thomas said. "That's kind of the whole point, isn't it? Showing that partnership makes us stronger, not weaker." They stood in the broadcast chamber, surrounded by holographic recording equipment that would transmit their images across light years instantaneously. Earth would see this. The Vexari Empire would see this. There was no taking it back. "Ready?" Zephara asked, her hand finding his. "Absolutely not," Thomas said. "Let's do it anyway." The broadcast went live, and Thomas watched their combined image appear on the displays. Human and Vexari, side by side. Zephara in her ceremonial armor and Thomas in formal Earth diplomatic attire that someone had retrieved from his quarters back home. He looked small next to her, human, fragile. He decided to own it. "People of Earth," he began. 3 weeks ago, I stood before Queen Zephara as your representative and made a bargain to save our world. I agreed to become hers in exchange for our planet's freedom. Many of you called me a hostage, a prisoner. Some called me a traitor. I want to tell you what I actually am." He squeezed Zafara's hand, felt her squeeze back. "I'm a man who's seen an empire from the inside, who's watched a queen govern 17 star systems with honor, intelligence, and a dedication to order that our own fractured world could learn from. I've seen the Vexari as more than conquerors, as protectors of species who would tear themselves apart without central authority. I've learned that strength and compassion aren't opposites. And I've discovered that the alien queen we feared is someone worth knowing, worth trusting, he took a breath, worth loving." The silence from the monitoring stations suggested he just detonated a diplomatic bomb. "Good." Zafara spoke next, her voice carrying the weight of authority but also something softer. "People of the Vexari Empire, you know me as your queen, as the warrior who claimed the throne through blood and determination, as the conqueror who has never known defeat. Today, I tell you something I have never admitted. I was lonely." Thomas glanced at her, saw vulnerability in her golden eyes that she'd never shown publicly. "For 8 cycles I have ruled alone, made decisions that affected billions without counsel I could trust, carried weight no one else could see. When I encountered humanity, I saw chaos that needed controlling. But when I met Thomas Garrett, I saw something else. Someone who looked at me as neither god nor monster, but as a person. Someone who challenged my assumptions, who made me question whether strength must always mean isolation." She turned to face Thomas directly, speaking to him as much as to their audience. "I spared Earth because of you, not because you bargained well or offered something I needed, but because in that first meeting, you showed me that compassion and courage can coexist with defiance. You became mine not because I claimed you as property, but because you chose to stand beside me knowing the cost. And now," her voice grew stronger, "I choose to stand beside you in return." "We're proposing something unprecedented," Thomas said, turning back to the cameras. "An alliance between Earth and the Vexari Empire, not as conqueror and conquered, not as master and vassal, but as partners, equals. We have different strengths, human creativity and Vexari organization, Earth's diplomatic flexibility and the Empire's unified authority. Together, we can build something neither species could achieve alone." "There will be resistance," Zafara said. "Those who see this as weakness. Those who believe I have betrayed Vexari supremacy or that Thomas has betrayed human independence. To them I say, watch us. See what partnership achieves. Judge us by results, not assumptions." They outlined the proposed alliance. Earth joining the Empire as an autonomous member with full voting rights. Human advisors integrated into Vexari governance. Cultural exchange programs. Joint defense initiatives. It was ambitious, radical, probably impossible. The broadcast ended and Thomas waited for the fallout. It came within minutes. Responses from Earth governments ranging from cautious optimism to outright rejection, Vexari commanders demanding clarification, and somewhere a coalition of hardliners from both sides apparently deciding that the best response to this proposed peace was violence. "We have incoming threats," Zafara's head of security reported, his expression grim. "A coordinated attack from rebel Vexari forces and human separatist groups. They're targeting this flagship. Estimated time to engagement. 8 minutes. "Of course they are," Thomas muttered. "Because nothing says I disagree with your diplomatic proposal like attempted murder." "Prepare defensive positions," Zafara ordered, her warrior instincts taking over. "Full shields. Combat readiness across all decks. Send word to loyal fleet elements to converge on our position." "What about the attackers?" Thomas asked. "We could try hailing them, opening dialogue." "They have made their position clear," Zafara said. "They will not listen to words. We must survive this, Thomas. If we fall, everything we've proposed falls with us." The battle was brutal and intimate, in ways that space combat shouldn't be. Thomas watched from the command center as Vexari ships turned on each other, as human vessels emerged from hiding to target the flagship, as the careful order Zephyra had built started tearing itself apart. He felt useless, standing beside her while she commanded the defense with precision that came from centuries of warfare bred into her species. Then the shields failed on the starboard side, and suddenly it wasn't a distant battle but an immediate crisis as boarding parties breached the hull. Zephyra drew her blade, the same elegant weapon she'd used in the garden, and moved toward the breach with the kind of purpose that meant she was about to personally demonstrate why she'd survived those 47 combat trials. "Stay here," she ordered Thomas. "The command center is secure, you will be." "I'm coming with you," Thomas said, grabbing a plasma pistol from the weapons locker because he'd watched enough training vids these past weeks to at least point it in roughly the right direction. "Thomas, this is not your fight." "The hell it's not." He checked the weapons charge, pleased that his hands weren't shaking much. "They're attacking because of what we are to each other. That makes it both our fight. Besides," he met her eyes, "you said we're partners. Equal responsibility, remember. I can't let you face this alone." Zephyra stared at him for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she smiled. Not the polite diplomatic expression or the predatory warrior grin, but something warm and genuine and entirely for him. "Very well, my consort. Try not to die. I would find that inconvenient." They fought through 3 decks of corridor warfare, and Thomas discovered that while he wasn't anywhere near Zephyra's level of combat expertise, he was stubborn and willing to shoot at things that were actively trying to kill them, which apparently counted for something. Zephyra moved like violence made poetry, her blade singing through the air as she carved through attackers with efficiency that was almost beautiful if you ignored the terrifying parts. The rebel leader, a Vexari general named Carthax who'd apparently decided the Empire needed more conquest and less diplomacy, cornered them in a junction near the main reactor. He was big even by Vexari standards, scarred and battle-hardened, and he looked at Zephyra with the kind of contempt that came from believing he knew better. "You have grown weak, my queen," he said. "Allowing this human to corrupt you, to poison our empire with talk of partnership and equality. The Vexari do not share power. We take it." "The Vexari," Zephyra said coldly, "evolve or die. You cling to old ways because you fear change. That is the actual weakness, Carthax." They fought, and Thomas watched in horror as Carthax matched Zephyra blow for blow, his strength nearly equal to hers. This wasn't like the garden attack. This was a real challenge from someone who'd also survived the combat trials, who'd built his reputation on violence. Thomas saw his opening when Carthax overextended, leaving his flank exposed. He didn't hesitate, fired his plasma pistol at maximum charge, catching the general in the shoulder. It wasn't a fatal hit, but it was enough to break Carthax's rhythm, and Zephyra used that moment to strike the final blow. "You shot a Vexari general," Zephyra said as Carthax fell. "That was either extremely brave or extremely stupid." "Both," Thomas gasped, adrenaline making his hands shake now that the immediate danger had passed. "Definitely both." The battle ended within the hour. The rebel forces, leaderless and faced with Zephyra's overwhelming loyal fleet, surrendered. The human separatists, realizing they were fighting alongside Vexari rebels against other humans, mostly just looked confused and gave up. It was messy and imperfect, and absolutely nothing like Thomas had imagined peace negotiations would go. They stood together in the command center, watching the tactical displays show hostile ships standing down, and Thomas felt the weight of what they'd just survived settle over him like gravity. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually survived." "The first challenge," Zephyra corrected. "There will be others. Those who oppose our alliance will not simply accept this defeat. We have begun something that will take decades to fully realize, Thomas, possibly longer." "Good thing I'm in this for the long haul, then." He took her hand, not caring who saw. "So, consort, partner. Guy who shoots rebel generals while his incredibly competent girlfriend does the actual fighting. What comes next?" Next, Zephyra said, her ears tilted in what was absolutely affection now. We govern, we build. We prove to both our peoples that partnership is not weakness, but strength multiplied. We face every challenge together and demonstrate that different does not mean incompatible. That's a pretty speech, Thomas said. You practice that. But only for the last hour while coordinating our defense. She pulled him closer, and Thomas went willingly, resting his head against her shoulder despite the height difference making it awkward. I have a question for you, Thomas Garrett. One I should have asked before claiming you before the stars. Yeah. Do you regret it, your choice, everything you gave up to save your world? Thomas thought about Earth, about his family he'd left behind, about the career and life he'd traded for this impossible partnership. Thought about the weight of it, the loss, the constant danger. Then he looked at Zephyra, this terrifying, brilliant, impossible woman who'd somehow become his entire universe. Every day, he said honestly, I regret what it cost. I miss Earth, I miss my old life, I grieve for what I gave up. Her expression fell, vulnerability flashing across her face. But, Thomas continued, I never regret where it brought me, never regret you. You make the cost worth paying, Zephyra, every single day. She kissed him then, properly this time. And Thomas kissed back with the confidence of someone who'd earned his place at her side through survival and stubbornness, and sheer impossible love. When they broke apart, Zephyra rested her forehead against his, a gesture he'd learned was deeply intimate in Vexari culture. I would burn my empire to ash before losing you, she whispered. That terrifies me more than any battle ever has. Good, Thomas said. Terror means we're doing something right, means this actually matters. They stood together, human and Vexari, looking out at the stars that stretched between their worlds, and Thomas realized the story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. Earth and the Empire, partnership and power, love built on impossible choices. Somewhere in the command center, someone was probably drafting the official alliance documents. Somewhere on Earth, people were celebrating or protesting or just trying to understand what this meant. Somewhere in the Empire, Vexari commanders were recalculating their assumptions about strength and weakness. But here, in this moment, Thomas and Zephyra were just two people who'd chosen each other against all logic and reason, and were going to spend however long they had proving that love could actually reshape the galaxy. So, Thomas said eventually, what do consorts do in their spare time? Please tell me there's something less stressful than fighting rebellions. Zephyra's laugh echoed through the command center, and her advisors looked shocked all over again. I will show you the gardens, she said. The real ones across dozens of worlds, and you will teach me about Earth's art and music and terrible coffee that you claim is essential to survival. Now that, Thomas said, is a plan I can work with. They walked from the command center together, hand in hand, consort and queen, building something new from the ruins of everything they'd known. Behind them, the Empire turned. Ahead of them, the future waited. And between them, impossible and perfect, love that had started as a bargain became something that might actually save two civilizations.